Hi guys, Grand J here and welcome to another one of our videos. Opus 9 is out and today we'll be discussing the new ice cards for Opus 9. Do note that this video is going to be talking about these cards in a constructed sense, not a sealed or draft sense. So yeah, let's get started. So the first card we'll be looking at is Varus. He's a free cost ice backup. He's FF14. When Varus enters the field, if the cost to play Varus was paid with CP of exactly 3 different elements, you may search for one card and add it to your hand. For 2 dull, put Varus into the break zone, choose one category 14 forward in your break zone and add it to your hand. So this is a card that we've seen similarly in 4 and 7, which coincidentally happens to be FF14 as well, in that they're both able to search for any card from your deck when they enter play. Varus is a little bit more inconvenient, although is cheaper in that you have to pay with 3 different elements of CP to put it into play. So this can be done very easily by tapping 3 of your backups of 3 different colors. Or alternatively, you can tap 2 backups of 2 colors and then discard a card from your hand that's a third color as well. So you can pay 4 CP. So it is within the rules of the game to pay to overpay forwards and abilities and costs by 1 extra CP if you're discarding a card as well. So you are able to put him into play with just 2 backups as well. So there is a certain degree of cumbersomeness or difficulty to trigger off his ability. He is a little bit slow if you want to pay that free CP for his ability. But being able to search for any card from your deck is a very strong ability in the game, so that kind of justifies it. His ability is a little bit easier to achieve if you do run some of the dual element Moogles or if you run Chaos or Cosmos in your deck as well. So those are certain ways in which you can make this cost a little bit easier to handle. His ability to break himself to return a category 14 from your break zone back to your hand, even though category 14 doesn't seem to be like one of the flagship categories that the trading card game really supports. There's actually a lot of great forwards in the game that you can return. So cards like Older Scions are FF14, Nidhogg, Hraezelger, Estinian, Gaius and all the guys that he searches for, Senna and Hildebrand. These are all different FF14 forwards that you can return with Varus. So it does mean that Varus is a card that you can specifically build your deck around for. So you can build your deck around 3 different elements of CP or backups and put this guy into play, and then subsequently you can later break him just to put a category forward from your break zone back to your hand, and then that frees up the Varus so that you can play a fresh one to search for another card from your deck. So he internally allow you to play free copies of this card in your deck. And allows you to play more than 1 copy of him during a game because of his internal ability to break himself. So it makes him like a very complete, very well-rounded package for a search engine. Although the difficulty is just being able to put him into play while triggering off his ability of 3 different elements, right? So I think that creative deck builders are definitely going to look at this card and think to themselves, oh yeah, how can I make this as consistent as possible without making the rest of the deck inconsistent as well. So there's a ton of different ways, and this is going to be one of those cards that's going to take some time for players to figure out what is the best combination of elements and colors in order to get this card to most consistently hit its effect. But overall, I think this card is a very good card. But yeah, it's definitely going to be one of those cards that's going to be more relevant towards the mid to end of Opus 9 rather than early on. The next card we'll be talking about is Vayne. So he's the first Ice Legendary of the set. He is a 5 cost, 9,000 power forward. His ability is all the forwards your opponent control gain the ability at the end of your turn. If you don't pay 1, break this forward. So what this means is that all your opponent's forwards gain an effect where at the end of your opponent's turn, they have to pay 1 for each of their forwards, otherwise they get to break their forward. So this is a very delayed ability for this forward's field ability. So basically, this is the longest time in which you play the card and then for the effect to sort of really come back into effect, right? So you play it on your turn, you have to let it survive for your turn, and then it has to survive the complete duration of your opponent's turn, and then at the end of their turn, then it triggers off, and then all their guys die, right? So this card is actually extremely vulnerable for a really long period of time in order to have this card pay off, right? So there are kind of really 2 ways that you can sort of make this card effective. One, you either play it in a sort of very heavy discard strategy where your opponent's hand is just so starved and they're effectively top decking every turn. In which case, if they don't top deck a good card or a removal card to deal with the Vayne, then you're getting those effects straight away. And like in those situations, your opponent's top decking, so they're trying to scramble and put whatever forwards they can on the field, just so you don't discard them from your hand. And so it will often cause extra discards or really awkward payments, just so they can play certain forwards, just so their forwards don't die from Vayne, right? That being said, though, there are certain weird instances where your opponent can take advantage of this. So let's say if your opponent is playing like Heroic Winzadane, and like they want to just break it so on the following turn they can play another one. Or if they're playing the Fire Legendary Cloud, then they can play it, not pay for it, just like let it die, mill 10, bring him back, and then like nuke again, right? So there are certain like enter break zone abilities or certain abilities where they don't want to commit or where they want to get rid of a forward that they can take advantage of Vayne's ability, right? So that's one major drawback to it. The other drawback is, like you have to have him protected for a long time. And the other route of doing that, besides from discard, is Ice has a lot of ways to protect their forwards in the form of anti-summon abilities. So Ice has a lot of different ways that they can counter summons. So doing that allows you to play Vayne, and then potentially allows you to protect it or to counter or to negate a particular summon that your opponent might have, which allows your Vayne to survive a little bit longer, which then allows you to trigger off the ability, forcing your opponent to pay a whole bunch of CP, right? So while this card doesn't inherently force discards, the way that it causes your opponent to tap one CP or tap one backup in order to keep those forwards around does force your opponent to discard extra cards or to play their cards or pay for their cards in really awkward ways. So you are passively getting extra discards for his ability. So he's very similar to Garland 9, who has the ability of like dulling one of your opponent's cards, because he's just like forcing your opponent to spend extra resources for effectively nothing, right? I think that probably the most relevant usage for this card is with Tama. So if you do happen to have a Tama, available, if your opponent commits to a large board play, you can then subsequently like break the Tama, pay your 5 CP, put Vayne in at the end of your opponent's main phase 2. And if they don't have a way to deal with him effectively, you could potentially break 2 or 3 of their forwards, or force a lot of discards from their hand, right? So I think that that's probably going to be the most relevant combination for this Vayne. Not to mention, like, this Vayne does clash with Opus 2 Vayne, which is the 4-cost 8,000 power forward that does dull and prevent your opponent's 5 and up forwards from reactivating. So that is another consideration as well for playing Ice decks. But that being said, a lot of people are really, really shitting on this card, and like, in general, I kind of agree if you take the mentality of like purely competitive metagaming, in the sense that like if you are just playing for the top 1% of competitive tournaments and to be like that one top percent players in a tournament, then this Vayne is probably a little bit too cumbersome of an effect to really sort of like take advantage of. So I like this card, and I think it's got potential, and if you can certainly play it in certain combos for great outcomes, but I think that at the highest level of competition, he doesn't get his effect or his benefit fast enough or consistently or reliably enough for you to really rely upon it. But I think otherwise it's a very powerful ability. Next card is Quistis. She is a 4-cost 7,000 power forward, EX Burst. When Quistis enters the field, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, add one category 8 forward among them to your hand, and return the other cards to the bottom of your deck in any order. Job Seed candidate forwards, you gain plus 1,000 power, and her S ability is level Def. For S Ice Dull, reveal the top card of your deck, break all forwards opponent controls at the same cost as the reveal card, add the reveal card to your hand. So she is well costed for what she does. Like, I do recall back in like say Opus 3, Opus 4, and Opus 5, we got these 5-cost 7,000 power forwards that were EX burst to search for a card, right? So Quistis, if you are building a FF8 deck, or if you happen to have a lot of FF8 targets, she is effectively one cheaper, right? So cards like Steiner, cards like Edgar, those are all 5 CP7Ks with EX burst. So you are getting like 1 CP discount on this. That being said, there aren't too many great FF8 targets in the game. So generally, like, the scrolls aren't particularly good. Renault's probably the best one. Laguna's not particularly amazing. Cypher kind of sucks. Adia's good, but like if you're playing Quistis, you got some Splash of Ice, which makes like Adia significantly weaker. So it's really difficult to find good FF8 forwards to really sort of combine with this card. And that's going to be what's really holding it back. In addition, the seed candidate pool is actually pretty shallow as well. So in terms of just like forwards, because it only gives its buff to job seed candidate forwards, you really only have Squall, Seifer, and Zell. Zell isn't particularly good. Seifer, you're really locked into having to play Idia or play the legendary Seifer, and Squall, he's not fantastic either. So you're not really buffing up a lot of different cards in your strategy with Quistis. So I think that like this card is just like a kind of a filler card. You just play it in the mid game, search for like whatever particular card that you need, filter through your deck a little bit, and yeah, you just move on from there. It's a mid game card that you can play for like good value and to help you find little bits and pieces for your combo that you need. Probably for a Renoa. That being said, though, Ice already has cards like Laguna and cards like Ysayle that can just search for any Ice forward from your deck. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to find a reason to play this card. I guess if you want to sort of up your burst count, which Ice doesn't have like the best burst cards, or doesn't have like super huge amount of burst cards, such as like say Earth or Wind or Water does. So this may be just like an extra burst card that you want to chuck in your deck just to sort of up that count. As to the S ability, is just like super random, right? So effectively, it's like Ice S Dull just to draw a card, really, right? So you got to reveal the card that you draw. So yeah, your opponent gets full knowledge of whatever you've drawn, and then on some random chance, maybe you might be able to break a forward your opponent controls. There are certain ways, such as using like Yule to put certain cards to the top of your deck in order to trigger off level ? Def, but it just seems really quite cumbersome to try to get these sort of effects off. Yes, maybe you can combine it with certain effects, such as within Water to Scry, to like order the top cards of your deck to get some sort of planning. There's actually quite a couple of cards that sort of scrying ability might be very relevant for. And like, I think most of them are Water. So, maybe that might be a little bit of a topic to talk about a little bit later in my set reviews. But, yeah, there's actually quite a lot of ways in the game right now to, set up the top card of your deck. And like, yeah, I guess that they can combo with Quistis, but like Water doesn't really sort of combine with Quistis particularly well, because I don't think there are many FF8 characters in Water, and none of them happen to be seed candidates as well. So not a lot of synergy there. I guess yeah, this Quistis is really just a way to like EX burst and to do some searching. Level ? Def is just something that you do with an extra Quistis in your hand, I guess. Next is Airborne Trooper. It is a free cost forward at 8,000 power, so it is above the curve. It's a standard unit. Airborne Trooper cannot attack. When a forward other than Airborne Trooper enters the field, Airborne Trooper loses all its abilities until the end of turn. So it's just another standard unit for Ice, and it seems like Ice gets some of like the most quality standard units in the game, right? So they get a whole bunch that like make your opponents discard. They make guys that can like draw cards, and they get just like big beefy guys as well, right? So this is like definitely one of those big beefy standard units as opposed to anything else. Its ability of like, yeah, it can't attack unless you play forward during that turn, is actually more of an annoying drawback in Constructed than it is in Sealed. So definitely when you play it in Sealed, he's actually pretty good, because he's like he's a beefy AK forward, and you don't really care if it trades into your opponent's AK forward. But in Constructed, you're like, especially around the mid game, which is probably the time that you'd be playing like Airborne Trooper, you generally only play forwards like every second turn or something, and you're otherwise spending other times of your turn playing summons or playing backups to sort of develop your board and to develop your resources. But like, yeah, so that's in Constructed, you're not going to be playing a forward every single turn, and more so you have to play a forward during your main phase 1. So it does force you to commit CP during your turn in order for this guy to attack, which can put you in some very bad positions. And that, like, if your opponent EX bursts a good card, they can sometimes kill the card that you just played, or sometimes your opponent might have some sort of combat trick or have some sort of like ability or summon that they want to use, and you've now committed like 2 or 3 of your backups to just like playing a forward just so this guy can attack. So I think that this card is like a bit of a noob trap. It's actually like a huge noob trap, right? Because he's good in Sealed, so people just think, oh yeah, this is like really good for me in Sealed, right? So they try to construct, and then they realize, oh yeah, crap, it's forcing me to play make a whole bunch of bad decisions in constructed play. And then all of a sudden it's like, they don't realize why they're losing. They're like, oh shit, he hit an EX burst and like he killed my new guy, right? So yeah, I think that this card is a major noob trap. Please stay away from this, guys. Don't play this card. Next we have Zilera. It is a 1-cost summon. Choose 1 dull forwards of cost 2, 3, 5, or 7 and break it. So it hits only prime numbers. It's a downsized version of the Opus III Zilera that we've received in the past. So that Zilera hits all of them that are dull, whereas this Zilera is only hitting one specific forward on the field. Do know it doesn't specify yours or your opponent, so I guess you can kill your own guy in certain situations where you do need to trigger off a enter break zone ability or need to like refresh a forward. So I guess that's something to note as well. So this is a very good cheap defensive removal. So generally, your opponent's guys will be dull after they attack you unless they have Brave. So it's a good way to just deal with an attacking forward, which I guess is a really good comparison, or a really good sort of companion card for Mateus the Corrupt, which is a 1-cost forward that's 1-cost summon that breaks a blocking forward. So you can use Mateus on offense and then Zalira on defense. So they pair up quite nicely. As for the cost that Zalira hits, so basically a large majority of the cards happen to be 3, 4, 5 in the current game, right? And like I guess there are certain cards that happen to cost 2 as well, right? So it basically hits like 60 to 70% of like the good forwards in the game right now, probably even more. So like a large majority of like good targets to hit happen to be like cost 3 or 5. Like for some reason, like you don't see as many like 4-cost forwards in this game. You don't see as many 4-cost forwards in this game as you may think. And because of that, Zalira just like hits so many targets, and if they're dull, you just get to break them for 1 CP. And it's really easy to keep just like 1 CP open as well. So you're generally not discarding cards. Sometimes if your opponent's trying to do a combo, you might be able to use Zalira to break them as well. So it's just overall very good card. And there's like no reason not to play it in ice decks in my opinion, unless you happen to be playing like a particularly aggressive ice strategy. Next, we have Sid Olstein. He is a 3-cost EX Burst backup from type 0. EX Burst, when Sid Olstein enters the field, choose 1 forward. If your opponent has 2 or less cards in his hand, dull it and freeze it. If your opponent has no cards in his or her hand, break it instead. So this is a very similar ability to the Sid Olstein we had before in the past. So that Sid was like a 5 CP 9k forward, and when he enters play, you get to choose one of your opponent's guys, and if they have no cards in their hand, they break it. So this Sid Olstein is cheaper, and it also gives you like a semi ability if you're kind of close, right? So if your opponent's got 2 or less cards in hand, which a lot of times, like even without like trying to do too many discards to your opponent's hand, you're probably going to be able to resolve that ability, right? So it's pretty easy to resolve that. And I guess if you're playing a more discard-oriented strategy, like your opponent's almost always going to be like 2 or less cards in hand. So this is almost always just going to be like, EX Burst, or enter play a dull freeze the guy at the very least, right? If your opponent does happen to be at 0, it's just like, great, it's fantastic. You just like blow up their guy while putting down a free CP backup. That's just like so much tempo value within itself, especially if you kill something bigger than 4 CP. So that's just like really great value. Like one of the biggest like issues with like previous Sid Olstein was that you actually had to commit a lot of CP in order to sort of really get him to resolve. So sometimes your opponent will be at like 1 or 2 cards in hand. You'll have to use like some of your discard effects. So you'll have to play like a Sarah or an Argath or something and make your opponent discard down to 0. And then use the rest of your CP to play Sid Olstein. So you're generally like paying free CP for like Sarah or something, and then like you're tapping a backup and then doing like 2 discards to play Sid Olstein. So you're committing a lot of like extra CP just to blow up their guy. With Sid Olstein. So with the new Sid Olstein, even if you don't necessarily need to break your opponent's forward, you can do this like pretty cost effectively, and like in a similar sort of vein, it's much less discards, right? So you can use like, say, a Flan or use a Sarah or use an Argath to like force your opponent to discard down to like 0, and then like you can use your last backup, tap it, pitch a card just to put this card into play. It breaks it forward, and also happens to be a backup as well. So this Sid Olstein, like the new Sid Olstein, seems to like present a longer focused like discard game, as opposed to the previous Sid Olstein, which seemed like much more aggressive. Whereas you're not like where you are sort of hurting your like longer term economy. This new Sid Olstein like actually gives you longer term economy because it is building a backup. It is costing less, and the fact that it is like EX Burst, it's very difficult to hit the previous EX Burst like Sid Olstein because your opponent had to be specifically at 0 cards in hand. Whereas this one, like, it's not that difficult for your opponent to be at 2 cards or less. So if your opponent attacks, hits it, you can like dull freeze another one of their guys. So like in all round, it's like better than the previous Sid Olstein, except for the fact that it's a backup, right? Which means that effectively you're only going to be playing it once a game. But there are ways that you can replay him again, right? So Ice does happen to have the legendary Kudra, which allows you to sacrifice 2 Ice backups to return Kudra to your hand. So you can play this Sid Olstein, then later on you can use like Kudra to break him, and then return the Kudra to your hand, which gives you a CP anyways, right? And then like, in a situation, you just pitch a Kudra, tap it back up, put a fresh new Sid Olstein in, and like either dull freeze one of your opponent's guys, or probably just like break one of their guys, right? So, Kudra's a way of doing it. If you do like add Wind to the mix, you can always use Miyun as well. So you can like play Miyun, bounce a Sid Olstein, play it again, and then just like pop one of their guys. So they're like, it does require a little bit more work if you want to resolve more than one of these new Citadel signs, but like on all accounts, he just seems like much better in my opinion. So I do like this card, and like he's definitely a card that you can potentially build around. And like so typically against discard strategies, like if your opponent if you do resolve Citadel Sign once, it's like it really sets your opponent back. So in the sense that if your opponent's got no cards in hand and you've just basically taken their best forward off the field, you've like it's almost game winning. Like it is possible for your opponent to come back if they have like really good top decks, but resolving Citadel Signs is like really just like almost the final nail in the coffin when it comes to discard decks. So I think this card's quite good, and like definitely a great card to be putting into like either mono ice discard or Icewind discard. The next card is Squall. He's a 4 CP 8k forward. He's a seed candidate. The cost required to play Squall onto field is reduced by 1 for each category 8 forward you control. It cannot become 0. When Squall enters the field or attacks, choose one forward. Choose one character an opponent controls, dull it. So it's effectively a starter deck card that you get without actually having to buy a starter deck. So if some of you guys who are older players might remember, the original Opus 1 starter decks all had like their flagship forward do exactly the same thing. They all cost 1 less for each forward of that cost you have of that category on the field. So so typically this card is probably going to cost you 2 to 3 CP. I don't really foresee you being able to play this card for 1 CP just because there's like not that many quality FF8 forwards that you would currently want to play in the game. So you're probably going to pay 2 CP. Paying 2 CP for an AK is probably pretty solid, and it does like dull a like character when he enters the field and when he attacks. So do note that it says character, so you can dull both backups, forwards, or monsters. So there's a lot of variety in regards to that. I think it is a temper card. So basically, if you've got some board presence, this Squall comes out pretty cheaply. Basically, it forces your opponent to it basically gets rid of your opponent's biggest blocker, which then allows your score which allows the rest of your FF8 forwards on the field to attack through. And he does it for a very cheap cost as well. So after you've got a bit of a board presence, especially if you're racing your opponent for board presence, you can then stop your opponent's defense by playing this card, and then basically keep it locked down. Because every turn, if Squall's the first one to attack, he's basically going to be dulling your opponent's best guy anyways. So in that regard, Squall is alright. The biggest issue is that it's just like the FF8 archetype just kind of sucks. Not so much that this card sucks. If there were just more quality FF8 characters, even outside of Ice, then this Squall could potentially see a lot more play. Definitely it's a easy in for title series, but within just constructed itself, it's going to be somewhat difficult to find a place for this card, although it does combo well with the Renewal from this set, and this Squall does combo pretty well from an earlier set, Laguna. They can that the free CP one that does allow you to search for a Squall. So you can search for a Squall and then reduces cost by 1 anyways. So there's some pretty interesting combos that you can do with it, but just right now the current number of FF8 forwards is just a little bit too slim just to really take advantage of this card in my opinion. Next, we have Azure Dragon Lassie Soryu. It is the second ice summon for this set. It's a 5 cost EX burst forward at 9,000 power. When Azure Dragon Lassie Soryu attacks, reveal the top card of your deck. If it is an ice card, add it to your hand. For discard 1 ice, choose 1 character, freeze it, and discard 3 ice cards, choose 1 forward, break it. So effectively, this card pretty much just says it is mono ice only, because otherwise you're just really sort of hindering the effectiveness of this card. So pretty much mono ice strategies only. There is some value from the fact that it is EX burst, because like I said early on, ice does not really have a lot of EX burst, and generally they don't draw you cards either. So this is a good way for ice to play a more mid-game strategy and add in some EX bursts that they can use to draw some cards, so they don't necessarily have to just deal with early game aggression. Its effects seem mostly like a last resort. So it's discard one card ability to freeze the characters, not bad. The flexibility of freezing a character is pretty good. So if you want to lock down a particular backup, not that the current metagame really has too many backups that you really need to sort of lock down or freeze, you can do that. Discarding 3 cards is much more of a last resort than discarding one ice card. So ice doesn't draw like a lot of cards, so yeah, you're like discarding 3 cards is generally going to be a cost deficit to you. Although definitely I can see situations where if your opponent is playing, like if your opponent does happen to have a forward that's, yeah, if it just stays on the field, it just like continues getting like massive value. Like cards like such as Vayne or cards like Barrett or something, cards that like effectively like just give your opponents cards every turn, then yeah, it might be worth pitching free ice cards. So it's like good to reserve the option, but yeah, for 5 costs is actually not bad, right? But you aren't drawing a card on the first turn it enters play, so you do get a card straight away pretty much when you EX burst him. But when you play him as just like a 5 CP 9k, you don't get any effects straight away, right? So you're going to have to wait for it to come back to your turn and then swing with him just to get a card, right? So like it's going to be quite a while before you like get any sort of like cost back on your card. And the current game is like very tempo intensive and there's a lot of removal, so it just seems like a lot of times you're going to be paying 5 CP, put this guy into play, and your opponent's going to blow it up, and you like don't really get to capitalize on him very much. And it's like, yeah, cool, like in response maybe you can discard 1 card, freeze 1 guy, but at best you like, it means it effectively just like says pay 7 CP, like 7 CP, freeze a character, right, and then die, right? But yeah, so like, yeah, the big issue is that like, how do you get this guy to survive, right? So like, yeah, it pretty much means that like you're going to have to play like those ice cards that like just like protect your guys from summons, just to really sort of make sure this guy sticks. But like, yeah, there's plenty of like forwards that like remove guys as well, right? So if you just like chucks on the board, your opponent responds by like chucking a Veritas on their turn, you just feel bad, right? So yeah, because of that, like this card is like a solid card, but it's just like the current metagame with like without rotation just makes it so like any sort of forward that doesn't give you value now, just really kind of sucks. But yeah, so definitely I can't, like in a situation where, yeah, if your opponent is like locked out, or if your opponent's low on resources, yeah, you chuck this down and your opponent can't remove it, yeah, he's getting you good resources every turn, right? But yeah, but it's like, it's just difficult to get to that stage of game. And like, if you've gone to that stage of game anyways, like you're probably doing pretty well. So this feels like a win more card, and winning more, winning more does not actually win you more games. Winning more just basically wins you faster after you've already won, right? But yeah, so I don't dislike the card, but yeah, it's just not a particularly interesting card for me to play. Next we have Terra. It is a 4-cost 8,000 power forward. It's a Magic Tech Knight and it's FF6. If a forward is dealt damage by your summon, the damage increases by 2,000 instead. This does have some very interesting applications. So yeah, it does like it does make your Moombas into like instant kill spells. It means Lich can kill 5Ks. It means Lich can kill 5Ks. So yeah, there are some like interesting nukes that you can amplify. The big downside to it is that, yeah, it is on a 4-cost AK body, so it's actually quite an investment just to increase your summon potential just a little bit. And like, yeah, she probably dies pretty easily as well. So, and then if your opponent happens to remove her in response to your summon casts, it reduces their potency back down to their regular, summon potency. So if you happen to have a Terra on the field and then you play Moomba and then your opponent uses some sort of removal to kill the Terra, your Moomba is now going to hit for Moomba's regular damage. And you've already committed to the Moomba expense, the Moomba cost. So your opponent's kind of dicked on your strategy without having to like counter summon, just like kill your dude, right? Which is something that they were going to do anyways, right? So yeah, so that's probably the biggest drawback to this card. So it's just so expensive. If Terra costs a little bit less, and has slightly smaller body, she might be a little bit better in that like it's generally more expensive for your opponent to remove your forward than it is for you to play it, right? But at 4 CP, your opponent's generally going to be able to remove it at like a pretty cost-efficient rate, right? And yeah, that's probably the biggest drawback of the card. Within Ice itself, there's probably not a lot of use or value for this card. So generally, I think it's probably going to be like more relevant or more useful in a wind or fire type strategy, because in those strategies, a lot of their summons do happen to deal damage, and yeah, amplifying those packs of damage is like pretty good, and generally they're pretty cost efficient. The summons in those elements as well. You might think it might be alright in Lightning, but Lightning, a lot of cards happen to like reduce power, same with Water, so there's not a lot of great synergy there. That being said though, yeah, this card is a common. It's kind of just a filler card for sealed and so on. So yeah, this card is not particularly amazing for constructed. I don't even think it's going to be one of those cards I'm going to particularly experiment with. Next card is Hurdy. It's a free CP backup from FFTA2. It's a Moogle. When Hurdy enters the field, reveal the top card of your deck. If it is a character, add it to your hand. Second ability is Dull. Put Hurdy into Break Zone. Choose one category FFTA2 forward into Break Zone. Add it to your hand. So if you consider the fact that, yeah, it is adding a character to your hand, there's actually a pretty good chance of you drawing a card, right? So effectively, it's just like any free CP search sort of backup, right? Yeah, because typically, depending on like what sort of deck you're playing anywhere between 6 to maybe 11 summons, right? So at worst, it's probably like an 80% hit rate. At best, it's like 90%, 95%. So you're hitting with Hurdy pretty consistently, in my opinion. It's not a guarantee, but it's like pretty good in my opinion. That being said, the Ice has a lot of pretty good like backup searches already. So it's going to be really difficult to sort of justify playing Hurdy over, say, Mog 13 or your Sail and so on. So yeah, it doesn't seem like there's like a great reason to play it. It is a Moogle, so if you are playing like more of a Moogle centric strategy, then yeah, this is potentially a card to go, especially since Ice is probably an important part for the Moogle strategy because you want to be able to play the Moogle Sarah. Yeah, in terms of its ability, in terms of FFTA2, there's not a lot of great FFTA2 forwards to recur in the current game. So you do have like classic Luso as well as new Luso. You have Adele and Allure. So basically those are the only real worthwhile FFTA2 forwards that you kind of want to recur. Yeah, this backup is interesting in that you're not paying any CP to break the backup to put those forwards back into your hand, right? So it's just dull break, right? So it's one of the very few, it might be the only, like I'm not sure, but it's like one of very few backups that can do it. And considering that this is effectively a 1 CP backup in majority of cases, it's a really cheap and efficient backup for it's a really cheap and efficient backup to recur some of these cards, right? But like the big issue is that there's just not a lot of quality targets. I do like the older Luso, in that, yeah, it looks at the top 5 cards of your deck for FFTA2 character. Now in hindsight, looking at it, I think that Luso actually deserved EX Burst, right? If this Luso was like made in the current set, this Luso would have an EX Burst. But yeah, as it is, like, there's just not a lot of great cards to really sort of combo with it. I think Allure is probably going to be your most relevant target most of the time, just because like Shield is really good and she's like a good attacker in general. But other than that, like, unless you're playing FFTA2, this card is probably not going to be that particularly relevant for you. Next, we have Hun Legs. It is a 2 CP monster, and like all the other monsters from the set, it's during a turn, Hun Leg is also a forward, and it's 5,000 power. When Hun Leg enters the field, or when Hun Leg is put from the field in the break zone, choose one forward and opponent controls dull it. So on paper, this actually seems alright. So there's a enter play dull and an exit play dull, and it's a 5k body, and it's like just 2 CP. So it's like a bit of a throwaway expense, and you're getting 2 effective dulls from it. And yeah, if your opponent's like not blocking it, then yeah, he's swinging in for damage as well, right? And during your opponent's turn, he's not a guy, so your opponent can't just like easily wipe him away with like an AoE ability, right? So on paper, it seems alright. But you probably don't want to pay for this card. So like in the ideal situation, I think it's like you get it for free using like a card like Sid Waff or using a card like Gao. If you can get it in for free, I think it's actually pretty good value. Yeah, so I feel like yeah, it's got good potential to just like help you punch through your opponent's board, and it just gets you like monsters onto the field as well. So yeah, like monster type strategies, I haven't really sort of like looked into what other potential cards like might be relevant, but yeah, if you're getting it for free, and that's like, I think that's really the goal with monster strategies. You want to get them in for cheap because they're just like, they're kind of garbage forwards. So yeah, if you're getting it in for free with Gao, I think it's actually not bad. If you can get it in with Urianch for free, then like I think you're really sweet. But yeah, so like I think this is one of those cards that requires a little bit more experimentation. Probably not the most competitive card. Definitely like locals playable, like good. But yeah, so like this card will definitely require some experimentation in order to see like how useful it can be. But yeah, so I think it's good in the right decks. Next card is Mind Flayer. It is a 2 CP EX per summon. choose one forward an opponent controls, dull it, draw one card. So this is like a part of the cycle of summons in this set where you get some very minor effect in relation to that element's like archetype, and you get to draw a card as well. At 2 CP, it is a little bit expensive considering it's just dulling a forward, it's not freezing as well. But it is EX burst, so I guess you are drawing a card if you do hit it off an EX burst, and probably like preventing one damage as well. So it's pretty good in that regard. So I think the best way to compare it is with Opus IX Shiva. So Opus IX Shiva was a 2 CP summon that could dull 2 of your opponent's forwards. But yeah, it doesn't have EX burst and it doesn't draw a card. So you are trading off the ability to dull an extra forward to draw a card, and I think that's actually like not a bad trade-off. It's probably unnecessary for Ice. Like if you play for Ice, you're probably playing it just for the EX burst draw more than anything else. But I think like in Ice, you generally don't need a lot more dull because there's just like a lot of ways to dull through your opponent's guys and to freeze them. So I don't think that this is going to be a particularly large mainstay for Ice, but I think it might be relevant for like certain strategies that want to splash Ice. So because it's pretty cost effective, I think maybe like an Ice Earth type strategy might find it relevant, just because there's a whole lot of Earth cards that can penalize your opponent or break your opponent's forwards when they're dull, and Mind Flayer is actually like a pretty cost effective way to dull their guys without having to expend an extra card. And yeah, generally those cards are pretty cost effective at breaking dull forwards as well. So yeah, like potentially just going like Mind Flayer into like Maskwoman, or Mind Flayer into into one of the guys such as Vanille to break their guys, or like Mind Flayer into Cecil, it's probably pretty good. So I think that, yeah, this card is probably not so much going to be relevant in Ice, but yeah, like maybe Ice Earth is going to be pretty decent. So yeah, I think looking at this card for certain strategies that want to up their burst count and find a way to dull guys when they don't necessarily have like dulling abilities is pretty good. Next we have Class 9th Moogle. It is a 2 CP backup Moogle. If Class 9th Moogle is on the field, Class 9th Moogle can produce win CP. So this is another one of, or I think it's the first one this set that we've talked about. So it's one of the dual element Moogles. So basically, you have to pay ICP to put this card into play, but once it's on the field, it can produce both ice, either ice or wind CP at a time. So yeah, it does help out certain dual element combinations. So in terms of just like strictly being a Moogle, it does help out the deck because like the Moogle strategy, it takes advantage of a whole bunch of cards that can take advantage of a whole bunch of like cards that have multiple colors or multiple elements to the payment costs. It does reactivate from Sarah's ability, and the fact that it can produce win CP does allow you to use it to pay for a card like Chocomog, which searches your deck for more Moogles, which will then help you fulfill your Moogle strategy. So so in that regard, it ticks a lot of boxes, and Ice and Wind both share certain like overlapping archetypes in the form of discard. So now means that Ice can like more easily play Wind cards, such as Thief, such as Zidane, that can like discard cards from your opponent's hand. So it is a pretty good consistency card in regards to that as well. And as compared to say Cosmos or Chaos, it does help you color fix for those specific instances, but it can be pitched when you don't need those cards as well. So Class 9th Moogle, it just seems like a good inclusion for like those Ice Wind decks, unless you have a really tight like backup space in your strategy. But other than that, I think it's very good. Next, we have Class 11th Moogle. It is a 2 CP backup. For 1 dull, choose 1 ice forward you control against plus 1000 power until the end of turn. So this card just seems like a worse Drew Clark in my opinion, or like, it just seems worse than Drew Clark. So yes, you can pay 2 CP to put into play on your first turn, whereas with Drew Clark, you're discarding 2 cards to put into play. But like if you've paid for this buff even one time in the game, you've paid more than you would have paid with Drew Clark, right? So, so like it just seems really expensive to do, and the fact that it's a Moogle doesn't really give it that much more like value in my opinion. So the buff is expensive, and like you'd rather play Drew Clark. But yeah, like what happens if you play Drew Clark and have this as an option, right? Well, I guess that's kind of a thing, right? But like it seems like games mostly aren't determined by the power of their forwards. It seems like they're often determined by who's got the more adequate or relevant removal at the time, and what hard counters what, right? And especially in Ice itself, Ice generally just like dulls your opponent's guys, or has ways to like get through your opponent's blockers. So in general, like buffing your guys doesn't really help out all that much. Yes, you can use this on defense in the sense that if your opponent has some sort of like removal ability or sort of some sort of damage summon, then yeah, giving your guys an extra 1k can like get them out of harm's range. But yeah, you're paying 2 CP and you have to keep this backup open, right? So like, how many times are you going to just keep this backup open on the potential that like it might be useful to buff you guys an extra 1k power? Yeah, whereas I think like, yeah, playing Drew Clark is generally what you're going to need to like just make your guys like better at combating. And I think, yeah, like you're holding too many resources up to make this card even relevant in certain situations. And I think like overall, by not taking advantage of this backup, like not taking advantage of having an extra backup dull, you're kind of like just expending more CP than you would like over the course of a game. So because of that, I don't think that these are particularly good. Next, we have Uke. It's a free cost forward at 7,000 power. When Uke is blocked, your opponent discards 1 card from his or her hand. So on one hand, this card is very there's a lot of free cost cards within Ice whose abilities is just like, oh yeah, enter play, your opponent discards a card, right? So there's cards like Sarah and cards like Argath that just all come into play, and your opponent like discards a card like straight away, right? So Uke doesn't cause your opponent to discard a card straight away, but there is potential for him to cause more discards over the longer course of a game, right? So if your opponent is playing a strategy where they do chump block with a lot more guys, so mainly water, yeah, you can potentially just like swing through and then gets blocked like maybe 2 or 3 times during game and force your opponent multiple discards. I guess it's kind of unrealistic for your opponent to allow your Uke to live. So at the drawback of you don't get an immediate discard, you have the potential to get more discards over the course of a game, right? That being said, though, like the odds of him like surviving aren't particularly great. Your opponent's generally going to want to just either take the damage, which I guess is a good thing for you, or your opponent's going to try to remove it, right? The upside is that it is a standard unit, so within Ice itself, there's actually like not bad support for standard units. You do have DGS Trooper First Class that can buff his numbers up a little bit more, and yeah, you can have multiple of him on the field, so yeah, you can stack multiple on the field, and they'll never really brick in your hand, right? And a free CP7K is actually like on curve in terms of stats. Generally, guys that like discard cards from your opponent's hand straight away are generally like well below curve. So yeah, he is a reasonable combat unit as well. So yeah, so potentially even in like a Ice Wind like standard unit type build, yeah, having multiple Ukes out on the field and like having them like with an arc buff or something like free CP AK. That like just force your opponent to discard a card every time he's blocked is actually not bad, right? So of course, if your opponent doesn't have any cards in hand, then you're not getting any sort of value out of this. But in those sort of situations, Ice have a couple of cards that can really sort of penalize your opponent for not having any cards in their hand, like Sid Orstein and Squall. So yeah, so like I don't think that this card is like immediate write-off. It definitely doesn't fit into like just like a pure discard strategy in my opinion. But yeah, so it's like if you want to experiment a little bit with some standard units within Ice, and probably Ice Wind, then this is probably like a good card to include in my opinion. Next, we have one of the most interesting cards of the set. It is Ghost. It's a 1 CP forward at 3,000 power. When a category 6 forward enters your field, you may pay Ice. When you do, play Ghost onto the field. This effect will only trigger if Ice is in your break zone. Its second ability is Possess for Ice 2 Dull. Choose one forward, remove it, and Ghost from the game. So, there are some pretty interesting combos with this card and some pretty interesting usages. So I guess first thing is like whenever you play like a 6 forward, you can't just pay the 2 Ice to put it into play and you just get like a cheap chump blocker, right? So it's just like an extra body at the very least that you can just like block and attack with, right? But there are certain other cards that it does combo with. I'll talk about Lock a little bit later, but so the first one I want to talk about is Mog 6. So like, yeah, that Mog 6, its ability is that if you have 2 or more category 6 forwards other than Mog, Mog can't be chosen by your opponent's summon's abilities, right? So yeah, you can play the Mog, pay the 2 extra Ice and get like the Ghost on the field. So if you like, it's just an extra body, but it can also help you achieve the outcome of having 2 other 6 forwards on the field as well. So yeah, it's easier to trigger off that Mog's ability. In other cards that sort of can take advantage of it is like a Kefka. So Kefka allows you to sacrifice 3 forwards and monsters on the field in order to play them from your hand for free. So if you are playing other FF6 forwards, you can like play them, put Ghost onto the field for free, and then later on you can just sacrifice Ghost with Kefka. So you can't play Kefka, get the ghost, and sacrifice the ghost. So you can't get the ghost from playing Kefka. Or I guess technically you can get a ghost after you play the Kefka, right? So you need to be playing a 6 forward first, get the ghost, then sacrifice the ghost afterwards to play Kefka. So that's a good combination for it as well. In terms of lock, because so there's an interesting ruling on lock, right? So lock's ability, it's called a conditional auto ability, right? So it says when it enters the field, if you control 2 or more category 6 characters other than lock, when lock enters the field, if you don't control 2 category 6 forwards on the field, this ability doesn't even enter the stack, right? So conditional auto abilities, they check the requirement of 2, in this case 2 category 6 characters. They check it both upon activation and upon resolution, right? So upon activation, if you don't have 2, this doesn't enter the stack. And then on resolution, it checks again. If you happen to meet the requirement on resolution, then yes, you get the effect, right? So if you play lock and you only happen to have one category 6 forward, category 6 character on the field other than lock, you can put the ghost into play, but at that stage it'd be too late for lock's ability to count him as a FF6 forward, right? So unfortunately, ghost does not synergize with lock in that regard, right? But something that does a way that it can be useful though is if your opponent happens to have if you think your opponent happens to have a way to break one of your FF6 characters in response to lock's ability, you can use ghost as just an extra card. So if you think your opponent's going to archer one of your backups or break another one of your FF6 characters, you can play lock, put in a ghost just to increase that number, increase the number of FF6 characters you have on the field, so that your opponent has to destroy 2 guys in order to prevent lock's ability, right? So that is one way. It's a way to hedge against your opponent's removal abilities. Not only that, but another annoying thing with counters to lock is that oftentimes you'll play lock and then you'll use some sort of ability such as Belias or some sort of ability like Sage to give him haste and then attack through. Now, the biggest and most common counter to this is your opponent playing Famfrit. So your opponent will play discard a card, a water card for Famfrit. They blow up a Viking or blow up nothing at all, and then they sack your lock that you've spent Belias or Sage CP to give haste to, and he doesn't get to attack, right? But if you play lock, you get the extra little CP to get ghosts on the field. Now, if you Belias or you Sage a lock, your opponent can't really do Famfrit, because if they Famfrit, they just kill your ghost, right? So there are certain ways that ghost can be used. It's a bit of an awkward card, but yeah, there are definitely some fun, interesting sort of mind gamey ways that you can sort of take advantage of this card. As for its S ability, kind of expensive, but it's not really you need multiple ghosts in your bin, and I guess it's when you draw a second copy, it's almost always going to be relevant in the sense that worst case scenario, you can just play an FS6 forward, you get the ghost back from your break zone for free, and then you can just use his possess ability later on in the game, right? So I guess it's a pretty easy S ability to trigger off multiple times during a game. And I guess after this ghost from its S ability removes itself from the game, you've got a new ghost in your bin, the one that you use to pay the S ability. So I guess you will always have a ghost available, right? Paying 4 CP and a discard, kind of expensive, but it's not too bad considering that it's probably pretty easy to achieve this S ability, right? Overall, this card isn't just straight up good on its power, but there's certain things you can do with this card that's going to be really interesting for the game. Next, we have Laguna. It is a 5 CP forward at 8,000 power. When Laguna enters the field, you may search for 1 ice forward and add it to your hand. So this is a Ysayle, but attached to a 5 cost AK body as well. So effectively, you're getting free CP, a free CP AK forward, because you are getting the 2 CP back on the card that you are searching for. So yeah, Laguna isn't one of those forwards that have a lot of clashing forwards. So yeah, there are a lot of Lagunas, but it doesn't seem like Ice really needs any particular Laguna in the current metagame. So yeah, this is a way to just add a little bit extra consistency for Ice decks. I guess Ysayle is an early game play if you want to search for early game ice cards, and then this Laguna is around a mid game play where you just want to get a board on the body and you want to be able to search for one of your sort of end game ice forwards, because you've already used the Ysayle that game. So it gives you a second a second way during the game to search for a particular ice forward, right? So it's like pretty solid in that regard. It is probably a little bit expensive in terms of like the CP curve. In terms of like ice already has like a lot of great big forwards to play towards the end of the game. Cards like Orphan, cards like Sephiroth, just to name a few. That like they probably want to reserve like they probably don't have much more deck space for like sort of like medium to large forwards. So in that regard, it's going to be difficult to squeeze in like more like copies of Laguna. Probably, I bet you're probably going to be able to squeeze like 1 or 2 copies of this card. It is FF8, but there's not like a huge reason to play a whole bunch of FF8 cards with this card. This card, I guess, is just more of a generic ice searcher. So if you want to play more of an FF8 strategy, probably the free cost Laguna that can search you for a squall is probably going to suit you a lot better in that regard. So I think that this is just like, it's a reasonable ice card to chuck into your ice deck if you want to sort of just add that little bit of extra consistency for just like mono ice. Outside mono ice, I think that there are like plenty of other options to help you search to get the piece that you need. And there's already a whole bunch of like free CP backups within ice itself that can search you for very specific targets. So like this is kind of just one of those like fringe extra cards that you can just like add into your forward line if there's nothing else that really like that you need to put into your deck, and it can just like add a little bit of consistency. But so overall, this card's just like kind of filler, really. Just like it's just there to put a body on the field and help you get to what you need. Next is Renoa. She is a 2-cost 5k forward. She is an FF8 character. When Renoa or a Category 8 forward enters the field, select one of the 3 following actions. If the forward is a card named Squall, select up to 3 of the 3 following actions instead. So choose one forward, dull it, choose one forward, freeze it, or choose one Category 8 forward until the end of the turn and gains plus 1000 power and first strike. So unfortunately, this card is Renoa, so it does clash with the best FF8 forward and searcher in the game. So yeah, it does clash with Legendary Renoa, both the free CP1 and the 4 CP1, and it does clash with the Searcher as well. There's not a lot of like FF8 characters as well, and not many of them particularly good. I guess you can like splash in other elements like such as Seifer in Lightning to sort of like up the number, or like play Ultimecia and Adia to sort of up that number. But yeah, just like it's not super fantastic. Like in title series is probably like going to kick ass, right? In the current game, like there aren't that many squalls in the game that are particularly good. This set's like 4-cost squall is not terrible. And the 2-cost squall from earlier sets that gains haste and first strike is going to be pretty good. So like if your opponent's at 2 cards, like putting this squall into play, dulling, freezing one of their guys, giving this squall an extra plus 1000 power and first strike. And he's already got like haste innately. Just like helps him attack through. So this card's not a bad card, right? So it's a solid card, maybe almost borderline good, but the fact that it just clashes with a whole bunch of other cards that are like much more useful in ice, like is its biggest drawback. And because of that, constructed it's like not good enough. Like constructed it just won't see play because of its name. But in terms of a like title series, I think it's like going to be pretty solid in that regard. Next card is Lock. Oh man, Lock. This card is one of those cards where it's like its drawback is the fact that it's named Lock, but it's so good otherwise, right? Like it's almost for balancing purposes that this card is named Locked because this backup is just so good, right? So it doesn't have EX Burst, but it's a 4-cost backup. When Lock enters the field, select one card type, turn over one card at a time from top of your deck until a selected card is revealed, add it to your hand, then shuffle the other cards revealed and return to the bottom of your deck, right? So, yes, it does clash with Lock, like the best FF6 forward in the game, but this card is just so good, like, outside of FF6, right? So, just being able to search for a very specific card type from your deck, I guess you kind of like, you're flipping over cards from your top of your deck. So you have to get the first one you hit, right? But other than that, it's just like, it's so good to like find you a piece of what you need, right? So like in the early game, you can play this Lock, just call backups and just like flip cards from top of your deck until you hit a backup. And like statistically, you'll find a backup that you can play in the early game, right? In the late game, you can like play this card and then like call either summon or forward. You can search for like one of your relevant forwards for the game. or like grab a summon that might be useful to you as well. So like it's a good backup late game, and it's like a super consistent one early game as well. And not only that, if you happen to have like a single target of a specific category, or a specific target of a single card type, then you can basically just search it out, right? So if you happen to run like just one type of monster in your deck, let's say Scale Toad or even something like Buckaboo or something, you can play this card called Monster, and then like, yeah, you just basically get to flip cards until you hit your Scale Toad, and then like you have it straight away, right? So if you like have 2 or 3 of these in your deck, you can just like consistently get the piece that you need, right? Like, yeah, so like if you want to play a strategy that was like using, I don't know, like Cactots or something, right? And you just want to get as many of them as possible, you just like play lock, call monster, search them out, bang, you're done, right? Or playing a strategy where like, I don't know why you would, but like have like very few summons, you can just like lock, search for that summon like very specifically, right? So this card just gives so much consistency to decks, and like especially for certain like control decks or combo decks, this card is just like super good. And yeah, because Ice has ways to break their backups in the form of say Kudra, you basically just have this card like available multiple times in the game, right? So he's just so good, man. If you're not playing FF6 and you are playing Ice, Lock is like at least 12 in every deck straight away, in my opinion. And the final Ice card of the set is Numao. It is a 2 CP backup. When Numao enters the field, you may pay Ice. When you do so, choose on forward or monster, dull it, and freeze it. So, just like the Fire one, this is yet another one where I don't think the cost is really justified. There are just so many 2 CP Ice backups that have, in some combination, a way to dull and or freeze forwards and to enter play, where it's True Chaspool, Emna, Jewel Nabat, Coctis, or the Emperor. There's so many ways to do it. Some of them have EX burst as well. Some of them have, like, they all have secondary abilities as well, now that I look at it. And the Mao, just like, yeah, you can play it for 2 CP on your turn 1 and get nothing out of it. Or yeah, you can pay 3 CP for it to like dull and freeze a guy on command, right? But yeah, so it's just really awkward, and you don't want to do it. And there are better alternatives in Ice. I guess the only one upside to this card is that it is a standard unit. But other than that, there's like no reason to play this card. Actually, I don't think I've even named a reason to play this card. Oh yeah, I guess standard unit. But yeah, this card's bad. Don't play it. In sealed, I guess it's kind of a thing, but yeah. And that's it, guys. So, were there any cards in this video that you think I might have overrated or underrated? If there's any strategies that you think I might not have touched upon, or any sort of ideas that I might not have really sort of explored, do let me know in the comment section down below, and we can discuss and chat and really sort of delve deeper in some of these ideas. So, if you guys enjoyed the video, please do like and subscribe. And until next time, Grand J out.